On the roof of the world, where the air is thin and every step can be your last, one man did what no one had done before. He stood on the summit of Mount Everest and rode a snowboard all the way down. But that wasn't enough. Just 1 year later, he came back, determined to take a more dangerous route. One no snowboarder had ever dared to ride. He reached the top again, strapped in, and dropped into the white abyss. He was never seen again. His name was Marco Siffredi, a fearless athlete, a pioneer, and a dreamer who vanished chasing his ultimate line down the world's deadliest mountain. Was it an accident? Did he fall? Or did Everest, as it has so many times before, simply refuse to let him go? This is the story of the snowboarder who conquered Everest and disappeared without a trace. As always, viewer discretion is advised. To understand how a young man ended up snowboarding off the summit of Mount Everest, you have to start far from the Himalayas, in the shadow of a different mountain range entirely. Marco Siffredi was born in 1979 in Chamonix, France, a place known as the birthplace of modern mountaineering. Surrounded by jagged peaks and deep powder, the mountains weren't just scenery for Marco, they were home. From an early age, it was clear Marco wasn't like the others. While most kids were happy sticking to the slopes, Marco was already climbing, hiking, and carving his own paths off-piste. By his teens, he had discovered snowboarding, and he didn't just fall in love with it. He merged it with his obsession for high-altitude adventure. His role models weren't Olympic athletes. They were climbers and explorers, people who went beyond limits. That same spirit drove Marco, but he wasn't reckless. He was calculated, skilled, and incredibly determined. Friends described him as someone who lived for the mountains, not just in them. And while others trained for medals or fame, Marco had something else in mind. He wanted to ride the biggest mountains in the world, not just climb them. He believed snowboarding could be more than a sport. It could be a way to express freedom, even in the most extreme environments on Earth. It didn't take long before people started to notice. By the time he was in his early 20s, Marco had already pulled off descents that most would consider impossible. But one mountain kept calling to him louder than the rest: Everest. And Marco wasn't just planning to summit it, he was going to ride it down. In the spring of 2001, Marco Siffredi set out to do what no one had ever done before. Fresh out of his 22nd birthday, he stood at the very top of the world, on the summit of Mount Everest, with a bold plan: to become the first person to snowboard all the way down from the highest peak on Earth. Originally, Marco had his heart set on carving his way down the notoriously challenging Hornbein Couloir. But when Everest's powerful, unforgiving winds cleared away the snow he needed, he didn't let that stop him. Instead, Marco swiftly adapted his plan and aimed for the Norton Couloir, a path just as treacherous, but full of potential for history. Imagine the scene. There he was, on May 23, 2001, surrounded by the biting cold, with supplemental oxygen coursing through his veins and a team of seasoned Sherpas who had hauled his gear up the mountain. Clutching a small talisman that had accompanied him on many adventures, Marco tightened his harness. Even his snowboard wasn't spared from the harsh chill. It developed tiny cracks, but that only added to the moment's intensity. Taking a deep, steadying breath, Marco launched himself into the descent. He expertly navigated his way around climbers, still making their ascent, carving through the crisp, white expanse. For the first 1,800 meters, every twist and turn was a testament to his training and passion. And even after a brief pause to catch his breath, he pushed on, making the entire 3,000-meter ride down with unwavering control and spirit. In just 2 hours, Marco reached the advanced base camp. That day, he etched his name into the history books by completing the first ever recorded snowboard descent of Mount Everest. Just a year after his groundbreaking ride down Everest, Marco Siffredi was already dreaming of going back. Not because he wanted more fame, but because he had unfinished business. His ultimate goal had always been the Hornbein Couloir. the steep, narrow chute on the mountain's north face that he'd been forced to skip the first time. It was more dangerous, more technical, and more appealing to someone like Marco, who constantly chased the edge. So in August 2002, during the post-monsoon season, when the mountain is quieter, but the weather is wildly unpredictable, Marco returned to Everest. This time, it wasn't a big expedition with sponsors and fanfare. It was just Marco, two Sherpas named Furba and Pemba, and a silent promise to himself: ride the Hornbein Couloir, or not at all. The journey up the mountain was grueling. Marco battled illness on the way and had to take breaks for oxygen and rest. But he was determined, obsessively so. He told friends and family before leaving that if he couldn't ride the Hornbein, he'd rather not descend at all. It was more than a goal, it was a mission. On September 8, 2002, just after sunrise, Marco reached the summit of Everest for the second time. The sky was unusually clear, but ominous signs were already creeping in: wisps of clouds on the horizon, the subtle shift in wind. Still, Marco strapped on his snowboard and prepared to drop in. According to Furba and Pemba, who waited and watched from above, Marco looked confident as he disappeared into the chute. That was the last time anyone ever saw him. After Marco vanished into the Hornbein Couloir, Furba and Pemba waited. At first, they weren't worried. A descent like this could take time, especially on such a technical route. But as the minutes turned into hours, concern began to grow. They scanned the mountainside through their binoculars, searching for any sign of movement, a figure in motion, a flash of his bright gear, anything. But there was nothing. Eventually, the clouds rolled in, thick and fast. Visibility dropped. The wind picked up, and with it, so did the fear. Marco should have been back by now. The two Sherpas descended the mountain, hoping to find him along the way, but the snow was untouched. No tracks, no equipment, no signs of a fall. Just an eerie silence. It was like Marco had vanished into the mountain itself. Back at base camp, the team waited for news. Days passed. A rescue mission was launched, but it was limited by the harsh conditions and lack of clues. No body was ever found, no gear, no snowboard, nothing. Marco had disappeared without a trace. His friends and family were devastated. Some held out hope that he'd somehow survived and was waiting to be rescued. Others believed he'd fallen into a crevasse or been buried by an avalanche. But without any evidence, no one could say for sure. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened on that descent. All we have is the last image: Marco Siffredi standing on top of the world, strapping on his board, and riding into legend. Marco Siffredi may have disappeared, but his legacy lives on. Not just in the snowy peaks of the Alps or Everest, but in the hearts of all who dare to push the limits of what's possible. What Marco achieved was nothing short of extraordinary. He didn't just conquer mountains, he redefined what it meant to push the boundaries of extreme sports. The first snowboard descent of Mount Everest, that alone made him a legend. But it wasn't just the act of descending the highest mountain on Earth that set him apart. It was the spirit, the drive, the fearlessness with which he approached every challenge. He became the symbol of a generation that wasn't afraid to take risks, to go further, to dream bigger. In Chamonix, his hometown, Marco's name is still spoken with admiration. His story continues to inspire snowboarders, climbers, and thrill seekers around the world. And for those who knew him, Marco was more than just a daring athlete. He was a friend, a brother, a son, someone whose passion for life was as fierce as the mountains he loved. But even with all the admiration, Marco's story is incomplete. His disappearance left an open-ended mystery that no one has been able to solve. Some believe he was taken by an avalanche, while others suspect he may have found a hidden path through the mountain, never to be seen again. The theories are endless, but the truth remains just beyond reach. The only certainty is this: Marco Siffredi left an indelible mark on the world of extreme sports. He showed us that sometimes the greatest risks lead to the most unforgettable triumphs. And though his final ride ended in silence, his spirit, that fierce, fearless drive, will echo across the mountains for generations to come.